And we are back. Welcome back to the King's Report. This Friday, September 29th, 2017. We are now joined with Pastor Gilson Oliveira, Continental Director of South America for Sanctuary, who is pastor in Sao Paulo, Brazil, President of the Church in Argentina, and regional leader in Central America. Work with outreach programs in New Jersey and the Spanish Church as well. Moved to America in 1997, lived in Florida since 2010. Gilson, thank you for joining us this morning from sunny Florida.
We have a very warm weather over here. Beautiful.
Yes, and now during the break we were talking about, when you moved here, compare with your life in America compared to your life in Brazil, just politically in terms of you have all these situations with the NFL, all these people, taking a knee, disrespecting the anthem. I mean, do they know how blessed they are to have this much freedom, even though American government has become corrupt and has become really decrepit? There's still a fight. There's still a fight for sovereignty here. And you see a whole wave with the Trump revolution and people trying to get back power locally. We just got Judge Moore in, who is a strong conservative, not the establishment candidate, who is standing up for libertarian conservative values. This kind of reality, people are starting to fight back. The American people are trying to take back their country and take it away from the, pathway of the neocons that were trying to push us into globalism and push us into world government and have the UN rule over us as an international body. In Brazil, what is the political state of affairs in Brazil? Do they have a more, of course we know it's very corrupt, we know it's very economically depressed right now, we know they lean heavily towards socialism. What is your take on Brazil and its current state amidst all those Latin American dictators and communist nations?
Well, in Brazil could be actually a case study because could be the future of the United States if the politics over here continue to lean towards the left. In Brazil right now, there is no party on the right. They're all left. And the reason...
Wow, yep.
It started with the influence of Cuba. Cuba and in the 70s and 80s.
Oh boy.
We still had
look at this idiot.
On those days.
Colin Kaepernick, this idiot, is running around with Cuba Fidel Castro t-shirts thinking it's cool. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So in the 60s, we had a military dictatorship that started in 64 until 85, and basically was a way to save Brazil from being another Cuba. And I grew up I went to high school in the 80s, actually in the 70s, and college in the 80s. And I was actually a leftist. I participated in riots, and I was brainwashed in school.
Yeah, that's how they do it. That's how they do it.
By Catholic priests.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
They were part of the liberation theology.
There it is, right there.
And they praised Cuba and Soviet Union every day.
Oh my gosh, give me a break.
Paradise. And then in the 82, man. I actually came to America when I was only 19. I stayed here for a few months on the Reagan years, and I went to learn English, and I went to learn about the country. And I fell in love with the country, and I learned about conservatism. So when I went back to Brazil, I had a very different view of politics.
Now, you were talking about the Brazilian Tea Party. They call it Tea Party, but it's a communist party. Tell us a little about that.
The Workers' Party.
PT. Okay.
PT party. That was a very strong party that started with Lula. That's Luiz Inácio da Silva. He was a worker in São Paulo in the car companies, and he started to form basically what you call sindicato. That's labor unions.
Okay.
He always criticized the government, and the government was always corrupted in Brazil. So they used this criticism to get in power. But he had all the support of Fidel Castro and all the communists. And they were very radical, very strong in college. And we had some fights and discussions. Usually end up with, I'm going to see you on the wall. That meant when they're going to bring me to the fire squad, the wall.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because the communists are so liberal and trendy and open-minded, they just murder and massacre and genocide anybody who disagrees with them.
Yeah. And
oh, Lord mercy.
There was all kinds of newspapers in college. We had even North Korean newspapers in Brazil. Just for you to have an idea.
Really?
Oh, yes. There's a lot of communist education in Brazil. And so this basically drove Brazil to vote for Lula in 2003. And he was in power until 2011. Now, during this period, the commodities in Brazil made a lot of money because the soybean, and Brazil became one of the countries that most produce grains and really rich. And also they found a lot of reserves of iron, oil, and because Brazil had so much money, now the Communist Party that was in power, they took a lot of money. Now the people, they have some estimates, maybe around 230 billion real. So it's around.
Sounds like Hillary Clinton.
That would be enough to solve most of the economic problems in Brazil.
Now, are there any political uprising movement, more populist, more nationalistic organization, movements that are rising up saying, hey, we got to take back our country. Hey, we need sovereignty. Hey, we got to stop the censorship, surveillance, the spying, the militarization of the police. All that we know is plaguing Brazil, the controlled economies, the central banks. Is there a political party that's starting to rise up and grow in power to stand against the globalism that the elites are pushing worldwide?
In 2008, we had the largest rallies all over the country in protest against the corruption. And it continued in 2013, also one of the largest rallies. And then Dilma, that was the successor of Lula, also from the PT party, she was impeached finally. And in March of 2014, they started to investigate a small gas station in Curitiba, Paraná, because they were laundering money. And they arrested some people, and they made a deal with them so they would cooperate. And they arrested more people, and they also cooperate with the police. And this starts to grow and grow and grow. And they end up arresting so far 160 people. They recovered 4 billion real, and 93 people were actually convicted of a crime. And these were very rich people, like the owner of Odebrecht, that's one of the biggest contractors in Brazil. It's
Biggest
like
monopolies.
$100 billion company.
They're all monopolies. They all collude with government to
yes.
make it profitable for themselves and destroy the competition. It's the same old program everywhere.
He was arrested and convicted and got 19 years in prison.
90 years in prison?
No, 19.
19, okay.
19
That's
years in
interesting.
prison.
That happens frequently in Korea too. You know, they get these big chaeboys, which are the big conglomerate monopolies, and they put them into prison for like a show. They just do it as a show. And then 1 month later, he's out. You know, they always say it's a 30-year conviction, but then the guy's out in like, you know, he's got some pardon or he's got some stupid thing. And the guy's out in like 10 days.
I'm not sure if this is going to happen in Brazil because this judge, Sergio Moro, he is really very strong and he's a descendant of Japanese.
Really?
He studied in Harvard.
Oh, yes. I remember. Yeah, there was a huge Japanese population when I went to Brazil many times. Massive Japanese population down there.
Yeah, it's like a 1.5 million Japanese.
Yeah.
And many of the federal police that are actually doing the arrests are descendants of Japanese also.
Interesting. Because in order to stand up against the elites in Brazil, I mean, you're talking about very corrupt mafia, but the government, of course, is the biggest mafia. But they have literally death squads that they can utilize, the police force, the Brazilian Secret Service for. They can literally kill anybody they want. If this judge standing is, he's facing all odds, and he's risking his life.
Oh no! In January 19 of this year, the Supreme Court Justice called Teori Savasky. His small aeroplane just fell out of the air, and he died.
Oh yes, just by chance, of course.
By accident, yeah.
Mechanical failure. It's always
mechanical failure. Yeah.
Oh Lord, that's why they want you to have AI technology and have driverless cars and driverless planes. So at a push of the button, it can disappear you into the Pacific Ocean.
Also, the PT party, they tried to take out all the guns of Brazil.
Of course. Now in Brazil, you have a lot of gun regulation in Brazil. I don't think you can carry a gun. I don't think
it would be very rare. Maybe some security guard can carry a gun. But even to have a gun in your house is very hard. So in 2005, there was an election.
Disarm population, yeah.
Yeah, and they voted against banning the guns. But then they created laws to make it really hard to get a gun. So you have to apply for a permit to have a gun in your house. All the guns are basically registered in Brazil. They charge 1,000 real, that's around $350. And but then you have to explain the reason that you need the gun. And self-defense is not a reason.
Defensa pessoal.
Self-defense is not a reason. You have to have another reason, some threat or the fact that you are carrying valuables, some reason. So it has been really difficult for people to get permits. Also, hunting in Brazil is not allowed. It's illegal. There's no hunting in Brazil.
Really? Wow.
No hunting. I grew up.
All the things that they shut off the epigenetics and allow good people to try to protect themselves is stolen, taken away.
The only state that allows hunting is the state from the south, Rio Grande do Sul. And the reason they allow, it's only hunts of ducks in one area because there's an overpopulation and they eat the rice on the rice plantations. So they allow them to hunt for a period of time.
Well,
and only hunting.
Oh, goodness. And of course, you're warning that America, if they continue to follow the pathway of Hillary Clinton and the leftist lunatics, that we one day could be and end up like not only Venezuela, but like how Brazil is. We pray that Brazil can start a populist trend that can fight their way out of this. And of course, if the US is able to do so and pull out of globalism and the world government, that will only help other nations and set the example and tone for other nations also to fight for their own sovereignty. We'll be right back after this short break with more with Gilson Oliveira and Tim Elder after this. Stay with us.
I've been a sinner, I've been a saint, a little bit of both every single day. I've been lost, but somehow I've been found. There's been some pain, been some regret, been some moments I'll never forget. But when I look back from where I'm standing now, there's never been a moment I was not held inside your arms. And there's never been a day when you were not who you say you were.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Friday, September 29th, 2017, 8th year of Chengi, 8th month and the 10th day. I'm Tim Elder, sitting in now for the second king of Chengi, Hyungjin Moon, and we're here with Gilson Oliveira, who is originally from Brazil, now a resident of the United States and a citizen of the United States, I guess, in Florida. Gilson, during the break, you were telling me about a strike that the police are having. Could you tell us about that? What's going on with that?
Yeah, this happened in February 4 of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole police of one state called Espírito Santo entered in a strike that lasted until February 25. So the interesting aspect of this is that the government controls the guns in Brazil, and the people don't, the good people, the law-abiding people, they don't have guns, and it's very hard for them to have guns. They cannot carry guns. They can have in their houses, but even in their houses, it's difficult to obtain the permit.
So
And,
the criminals must have had a field day during the police strike.
Oh yes, the thieves basically control the whole city for 4 days, and they end up killing 199 people on the streets. They didn't allow anybody to go out of their houses. If these criminals catch anybody walking outside, they would just kill them. So they just want to show that they could control the population if the police is not present.
So what happened after the strike ended? Did the police regain control?
Well, the government had to send the army to regain control of the city, the capital. And during this period, they stole 600 vehicles. Were stolen. And most of these people were killed on the first days of the strike, especially on February 6th. They killed 40 people, February 7th. And when everybody stayed at their homes, then less people were killed. And there was no protection because they didn't have guns to protect themselves. So this is a lesson that we should learn. You cannot only rely on the government to protect you.
Yeah. Now, one thing about Brazil that I often hear is that the race relations in Brazil are actually quite good. Can you tell us about that? How does that happen? Because that's one of the things that America has been struggling with, especially now. These protests at the NFL and so forth are related to race relations in America. I wonder if Brazil has anything to teach us.
Yes, Brazil is a very large country. It's size a little bigger than the continental United States without counting Alaska. And has a population of 210 million people.
About 2/3 of the U.S. Okay.
Yes, and around 50%, maybe 51%, it's or either black or mixed.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that there is a lot of mixed marriages
Mm-hmm.
is that the Portuguese fell in love with African American women. So they were not racist, and they married them. So the population, the real African American, we have only in one state called Bahia. It's a big state in Brazil, so that would be around 8% of the population that are more, we could say, like African American descendants, and all the others are all mixed. And
so it's a history of interracial marriages then that has brought about a society that has little or no discrimination. Is that what you're saying, or?
Yeah, there's no. I grew up with friends that were from many different races, descendants of Japanese, Italians, Germans, Africans, and most of the people that came from, to Brazil were from Angola and Mozambique.
Now, did Brazil in the past have a history of slavery?
Oh, yes. Yes, I think even maybe more than here, maybe.
More than here?
Oh, yeah.
But slavery does not exist now.
No.
Okay, so how did that? How is it that go from a slavery to a society with no discrimination?
Basically, due to mixed marriages. And I don't know exactly well, basically because the Portuguese that were in Brazil, they didn't have women, not so many women, so they had to marry or native Brazilian or African American.
I see.
So a lot of men came to Brazil, but not so many women. So they married the native Brazilians and married the African descendants. And Brazil became a very mixed culture.
But I wonder, let's look at the elite class in Brazil. Is that also racially mixed, or is it a particular race that dominates the elite class?
I think it's also mixed. It's not. There is racism in Brazil due to money. I mean, there's a big difference between how rich people treat each other and the way. That's a serious problem in Brazil. Discrimination because of economical status. This is a reality in Brazil. Also, the capital of Brazil is in the hands of a small group of the elite, the rich people in Brazil. Also, the land, it's in the hands of big corporations. So there was always, from maybe 100 years, a struggle in Brazil for land, where poor people want to have also land and farm. And the left took advantage of this. Fidel Castro was very good in finding weaknesses in the countries to exploit and introduce his ideology. So there is a big movement in Brazil called Sem Terras, that means landless.
The landless, okay.
Yeah, and when I returned from America on the 80s to Brazil, I started to do a research, and I visited libraries from the liberation theology, and I found very interesting books. No, they made the books very simple with like a cartoon type of book, and the whole idea was based on Moses conquering the promised land. So they showed all these farmers marching with the communist flag and all the tools and invading land, invading farms. And they educated them, and they created a movement that's really big in Brazil. It has 30 years. It's a 1.5 million people movement.
So these people present themselves as being similar to the Israelites moving into Canaan and conquering the lands in Canaan for themselves.
Yes. And
That's
they were active. I mean, they invaded farms that they had a big lobby with the PT party, because the PT party was also from the left, also with friends with Fidel Castro. So the PT party made laws saying that if a farm is not producing for a few years, there is no plantation, there is nothing, it can be invaded. And the owner cannot remove the invaders. So they start invading farms, and but because of also politics, sometimes they invaded farms that were producing. So then the government had to send the police, and there were some struggles, sometimes even death. And it became like a very violent movement with time. And recently, because Fidel Castro died and things are changing a little bit, they want to put a better image on the movement. They became more peaceful. So they are only invading farms that don't produce. And they are also dividing the land in small farms, and they are studying new technology to produce. So actually, it has become the most producing lands in Brazil, these small farms from this movement.
I see.
They produce the majority of the groceries, like lettuce and cabbages and all the... But the movement grew up so much that they are also creating schools. They're creating communities, and they're creating schools, and they send the students to study in Cuba.
So is this group, when they take hold of land, do they hand it out? Do they divide it up for their people, or do they hold it in common? Is it kind of a communist, common ownership of land, or is it individual property?
The government regulates the distribution of the land, so they have to divide in lots, and they have to give the deed to the owner of that land. I
see. But I'm curious about one thing. With the police going on strike, and with people invading lands, sometimes in lands that are actually farms are producing, I would think that there would be a call for or movement of people who say, "Hey, we need guns. We need to be able to defend ourselves. We need to be able to defend our land." Is there any kind of movement like that in Brazil? People calling for guns?
Yeah, there is a movement. That's why during the plebiscite, the election, they voted against banning the guns. So they tried to remove all the guns from the population, but they lost. The government lost in the election. They created a lot of laws to make it really difficult to have guns, but still, Brazil has 17 million guns in the hand of people legally.
17 million. That's in a country of, what do you say, 210 million? That's
Yeah.
not very many. Mhm.
And 9 million illegally, they calculate that, no, maybe more. We have a problem with the drugs in Brazil, especially in Rio de Janeiro. The drug lords, they created bunkers with machine guns, and they took over parts of the slums of Rio de Janeiro. And the police had to call the army to solve the problem. So the army had to bring even tanks to invade to be able to enter the bunkers. They had huge castles with
That's amazing.
guns.
It's like, it sounds like a war.
Oh yes, there was a war for a few months. So the criminals in Brazil are very powerful. And they have the help of, sometimes the help of the police.
So the criminals are, I guess, because of the drug money, the criminals are able to bribe the police, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. Some big leaders were arrested and they escaped like in a week.
Now, does this have anything to do with this recent scandal that's going on, where you say 160 politicians and business leaders have been arrested?
No, these are different. These are.
You said it was money laundering. I think you said it was, wasn't it?
This is. It involves Petrobras, the oil company of Brazil, and they. Just for you to have an idea, one of the payments that they did to an American company paid the government to have them contracted, to buy the contract. They paid under the table $8 billion. $8
billion?
Yes, it's
that's
like
quite a bribe.
You put an envelope and just slide.
Yeah, that's a few suitcases. Yeah,
few suitcases.
Yeah,
It's more like a house.
Trucks, yeah, a house or a truck. Yeah,
it's a lot of money. These people.
What did they get in? What did they get in? What did they get for $8 billion? A contract?
Oh, a contract, yes. Because Brazil found one of the largest reservations of oil in the Atlantic.
I see.
It's one of the largest in the world. So there was a lot of a competition among oil companies. And the one that won the contract, they actually paid the government to for the contract.
Actually, in America, it's illegal to give bribes to foreign companies or foreign governments, and I wonder if that company was prosecuted here in America.
I don't know. This was on the news over here, even on the New York Times.
Oh, it was in the New York Times. Okay.
There's news all over. Because it was a big scandal at the time. Maybe they even lost the contract. I have no idea.
I hope they did. Yes, if it was revealed that they paid for it. Yes.
Most of these people were arrested, and Dilma, be the head of Petrobras, and she became the president of Brazil, also from the PT party, and she was impeached. And now the the Temer, that was the vice president, now is the president, and he is being also investigated.
Okay. All right, Gilson, we've come to the end of our broadcast. I want to thank you for being with us this morning and to give us some information on what is going on in Brazil and to give us an understanding of how we can improve, I guess, perhaps improve race relations here in America through interracial marriage.
Yeah, that would be the best way.
That would be the best way. Of course, we have experience with that in our movement, so we need to further that. Right, and also a lesson on how we need to make sure we keep our gun rights, because we don't want the country to fall into a situation, like you said, where it's a war between the police and the criminals, where the people who are basically unarmed and have to be on the sidelines and being killed when the police go on strike. Thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone who joined King's Report this morning. And I'll be back tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, for another King's Report, 5 a.m. And hope that you will then. So God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.
May this offering stretch across the skies. These hallelujah be multiplied. Your love is like radiant diamond bursting inside us. We cannot contain. Your love will surely combine like blazing wildfire, singing your name. God